Hi everyone, and welcome to the new edition of We Are Sunderland with myself, Scott Wilson, and Dom Shaw. Well, Dom, plenty to go at in this edition. We will talk Wembley. Obviously, we're a little bit on from it now, but we'll have a quick look back at that, talk about the weekend and all of that. But more importantly, we'll throw it forward. We'll have a look at where Sunderland go next. What do they need to enable them to make a success of things in the Premier League? Who might be coming? Who might be going? What we can expect from the summer? All of that kind of stuff. As ever, the vid is in conjunction with our sponsors, the Fans Museum and Cospex Opticians. Thanks to them as always. Dom, Wembley, when we spoke ahead of the game, we kind of said it might be tight. Kind of said it might go at the wire. Well, I mean, the weekend as a whole was incredible, but the game itself, I mean, you literally couldn't have made it up.
Well, I was just about to say, neither of us could have had the audacity to sit here last week and predict Tommy Watson coming off the bench with a last-minute winner. It felt, and I mean this as a compliment, it felt fitting of Sunderland's season, I think, to find a way as they did. We spoke to Regis Labrise last Thursday, and he said then that the biggest takeaway, the biggest compliment he can pay his players is while they're hugely talented, what he quickly learned was that they have immense character. And by God, did they show that last week. I know we'll get into it, but to respond to losing Luke O'Nien in the fashion they did, to respond to being really completely outplayed in the first half, I didn't think Sunderland showed up in the first half.
Yeah.
And then to make the changes they did and to turn the game on its head like that, just incredible. And I think this Sunderland team, regardless of how next season plays out, I think they'll offer so much to the Premier League. The team, the club, I think it feels so fresh, doesn't it? I think they'll offer so much, and I think they've shown against Coventry and against Sheffield United just how much they've got to offer and what they'll bring to the table.
We'll talk about the future and everything. We'll talk about the game itself in a minute. But just to reflect very quickly on the kind of weekend as a whole, I mean, there's a cracking piece, a kind of a trail on social media that Roker Report put up of kind of all the things that Sunderland have been through, going back really to when Sam Allardyce left. Did you read it?
Yeah, class.
Loved it. I mean, it was absolutely brilliant. And so much in there that you forget about, to shout out to them straight away. But I mean, for a club that has been through the absolute ringer, to have a weekend like that, Covent Garden, Trafalgar Square, the morning of Wembley Way, I popped into the Green Man for an hour or so before kickoff with 3,000 fans in the beer garden there, which was incredible. The game itself, just everything about the weekend. I mean, like you said, we'll talk about what it means for the future. And yes, next season's going to be hard and all of this. But if you're a football fan, those memories, those moments, that weekend, I mean, that's what it's all about, isn't it? That, it's a bit trite to say it makes the defeat at Cheltenham and the 6-0 at Bolton and the trekking to Burton and the countless blooming FA Cup first round defeat. So it's trite to say it makes it worthwhile, but you know what I mean? Like to go through all of that and then have a weekend like that.
Yeah, I think though the point you're getting at there is having gone through all of that, it makes moments like Saturday all the more special because
absolutely.
To score a 95th minute winner at Wembley, a substitute, a hometown boy, it is, if you were drawing up the perfect dream scenario as a fan, it's probably going, you want to win 4 or 5-0. But as a fan, to be 1-0 down at Wembley and to score 2 goals from behind with the winner coming in the 95th minute, and I've watched it back from various angles as we did the Ballard, and what you're watching is not Watson, but the fans, and you're picking out the faces, aren't you? And people falling over themselves, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? And I think that this is meant as like no disrespect to the Sheffield United fans. Sunderland supporters outperformed them all weekend. On Friday night, it was only, we were saying, weren't we, in the city?
Oh yeah, I mean, we wondered before the game, weren't we? Was this going to be the first time when there was 2 clubs down on mass and everything? Well, I mean, it still baffles me really that Sheffield United's attitude seemed to be, we'll just rock up an hour before kick-off. And, but anyway, that's up to them. But no, you're absolutely right. I mean, the night before the game, goodness me.
But then even in the hour before
Yeah.
Wembley on Saturday, the T4, the red and white, the noise.
Well, and let's be honest, the bank of empty seats banging behind the goal at the Sheffield United end. I mean, that's not a good look for, what is a big club.
No, I know. I thought so, and I get the late confirmation of kickoff, travel disruption, all that. But
well, it's the same for Sunderland.
Same for Sunderland. Sunderland supporters were amazing, weren't they? And to get that moment, like we say this a lot, don't we, in football? But that is truly one of those moments that will stay with you forever. As will the Ballard moment, and you just couldn't write the whole.
We'll have two of them.
Playoff there, and I think on a football side of things, Sunderland deserve immense credit really for their bravery. I think the bravery in recruitment, the bravery with the vision, the bravery to ignore all the outside noise 12 months ago when people like us on a weekly basis were asking what's going on with the head coach search, the bravery to then appoint someone who then people like us are saying, well, who the hell's he? And he's just been relegated with Lorient. And then the bravery of Lebris on countless occasions this season to make changes, tactical and personnel, to rest his key players with 5 games to go and lose 5 games going into the season. And then at Wembley, to take off your captain with 25 minutes left and 1-0 down and effectively put 4 attackers on with Enzo Lafite playing off just behind them. How many times this season have we praised Lebris for his in-game management? Well, he had a blinder again on Saturday because you could make the case that he got it wrong. I think you did. You were saying
I was just going to say exactly that, yeah.
I think you could make the case that against Coventry and in the second leg and at Wembley, he got it wrong. But hellfire, he made amends, didn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I was just going to say that I think you can definitely, the Coventry second leg, in hindsight, Sunderland really shouldn't have stuck with a 4-4-2. At Wembley, I don't think the Mundell rig 2 wide positions really worked. But, in both occasions, Lebris was really, really decisive, really bold, made the changes, ripped up the formation in the first game, completely changed personnel at Wembley. And ultimately, that's played a massive, massive factor in Sunderland getting to where they are. And we, you can't let it go without reflecting on Watson, which is just a great story. I mean, we all know what happened. We all know it to death by now, but it's still just quite something, isn't it? That, after everything that's gone on, he's the one that pulls up with what is a great fit. I mean, yes, Kiefer Moore hands in the ball on the plate, but my God, he's still got a load to do there. Such a composed stroke into the corner. And, I mean, you just couldn't make it up.
And I think O'Nien as well. You can't. O'Nien's story and the agony, and with one arm in a sling, trying to lift supporters with the other, disappears to the dressing room with his family, re-emerges to the bench, belts down the touchline, and there he is at full time. And he's been there through the good and the very bad, hasn't he, in the last few years? And he's playing Premier League football now.
As Roberts, to be fair, I thought it was good as well that he came on and made the change, because he as well has been a kind of thread all the way through this. And he's had his ups and downs for Sunderland. He's had spells when he's looked unplayable. He's had spells when he hasn't been getting in the team. But he's another one. And I thought you actually spoke to Roberts after the game, didn't you? And I thought he was so honest about it down there, kind of saying, look, I feel Sunderland have kind of trusted me at times when I probably haven't deserved it. I've had contracts given to me when, they could quite easily have said, well, we don't think you're up to it anymore. And he obviously had the calf injury in the week and barely trained, couldn't start. And yet there he is basically saying, look, if you need me, I'll give you what I've got. And if I break down, so be it. I'll go on my summer holidays knowing I've done what I can. And that, that's quite an attitude to have, isn't it?
And that was his best, 20 minutes of the season?
Oh, yeah.
He made such a difference, didn't he?
Massive difference.
And we've got another piece. Keep your eye out over the course of the next couple of days. We've got another piece with Roberts, and he's talking about Lebris and how good Lebris has been. But he talks about the young players in the squad and says so many of them can go on to do great things. And I think that's the thing now when you're going up to the Premier League. We've talked, haven't we, on numerous occasions this season about Dan Ballard, Trey Hume, Dan Neil, Chris Rigg, Jobe Bellingham, and we'll get to Bellingham, I know, but all these players who will be getting looked at by Premier League clubs who will go on to play in the Premier League. Well, that would have been, I think, one of the most disheartening, difficult things to stomach had Sunderland lost on Saturday. This kind of likeable and such a cleverly assembled side would have been pulled apart. They wouldn't have lost them all, but they lost some of them. To go up and to continue the story in the Premier League is going to be great, isn't it? For them, for the fans, for everyone involved, really.
No, absolutely. And like you say, we'll get an idea of how good this team can be, might be, as next season unfolds. But it is exciting to think that, they stay together, the core stays together. We get to see it. We'll get to how Sunderland might get on in the Premier League in a sec. Let's kind of focus in then on where we're at next. And immediately thoughts turn to transfers and what might happen this summer. The reality of football is just that Lebris was asked about stuff immediately in the press conference afterwards. We're now a few days down the line and things are starting to crystallize a little bit. So let's look at outs first. We know Tommy Watson's gone. He's going to Brighton. There's been little suggestions, might he come back on loan, but that feels unlikely at the minute. You would imagine Herzler at Brighton will want to see him in pre-season and Watson will clearly want to prove himself. So Watson's gone. Jobe, we know he's been to Germany. Met with Eintracht Frankfurt, met with Borussia Dortmund, suggestions that he might also have had some kind of contact with Leipzig. We now know from various kind of social media strands that he's managed to get himself over to Ibiza and living up there in God knows where. But there's also been suggestions, though, that actually Sunderland are now willing to dig their heels a bit in this and put up a bit of a fight and see what they can do in terms of keeping him. Where do you think we're at with Jobe, and what chance do you think Sunderland realistically have of hanging on to him to the start of the start of next season or the next season?
Well, it's funny you mentioned Ibiza there because I was on Facebook last night just doom scrolling as you do, and Wayne Lineker popped up. And I'm
I saw that.
Why the hell is my algorithm coughing up Wayne Lineker to me? And then I realised that it was Jobe Bellingham.
It coughed it up to me as well.
I think the one thing what we didn't know this time last week, we knew all these clubs were in for Bellingham. We knew he was very much in demand. What we didn't really know was what happens if Sunderland go up. If Sunderland didn't win promotion, we knew that Bellingham was going to go in all likelihood. I think what we've discovered really in the last few days, and let's see how it plays out, but what it feels like we've discovered is it didn't really matter. Bellingham's likely to go regardless. And he's got the offer clearly of Champions League football. Frankfurt and Dortmund are both going to be playing in the Champions League next season. With Dortmund, there's clearly the strand of Jude having played there and impressed there. I think even if it's not Dortmund, but the other Bundesliga clubs, the family and representatives were clearly hugely impressed with how Jude's career was managed there and how he progressed to the next step. Yeah. We were having the conversation, weren't we, on the way there and on the way back as to whether there'd be any appeal, attraction. I thought there might be as to being the first Bellingham to play in the Premier League. Now, what we don't know yet is there going to be any Premier League interest? Crystal Palace have been strongly linked in the past, but now Sunderland are in the Premier League. What sort of price are a rival Premier League club going to have to pay to get potentially their most valuable player out of it? And the same can be said for clubs in Bundesliga, because that was the noises coming out of Germany this week, wasn't it? Frankfurt, for example, talks went well, club officials confident, but the sticking point might be the fee. And what we don't know yet is, do all these interested clubs have the same view as Sunderland when it comes to what Bellingham's worth and what they're willing to pay? That I think is what we're going to find out in the next week or two, isn't it?
Yeah. I think the fact that these meetings had clearly been set up well in advance of the playoff final and everything, and the fact that he's gone straight over to Germany speaks a lot to me that like we know how much of a guiding hand the family are with both Bellingham brothers. They have been right throughout their career. It just feels like this has been decided that this is the next step for Jobe, that he'll do the season with Sunderland and then the Bundesliga's call and he's along the same path as Jude then. And you're right. I think Sunderland perfectly rightly dig their heels in. They'll want to get the best possible deal, both in terms of an upfront fee, both in terms of the add-ons, both in terms of a future sell-on clause, because that's got the potential to be hugely lucrative somewhere down the line. I think it's just hard to see, once it's got to this point, how Sunderland hang on to him personally.
Clearly, Bellingham's family and representatives are a whole lot more experienced and better qualified than we are. But you say there about being the next step. Do you think it's the right step?
I think getting out of England might be the right step. Yeah, I think that it worked. So it worked for Jude, and the thing is, rightly or wrongly, Jobe Bellingham in the Premier League will be a little bit of a circus, won't it?
Jude's brother, won't he?
Yeah, it'll be Jude's brother. It'll be, is he as good as Jude? Is he not as good as Jude? Is his career not going to live up to it? All of this. Now, clearly, there will be comparisons in the Bundesliga because Jude played in the Bundesliga, especially if he goes to Dortmund. But it won't be as intense as it would be over here. It just will not be as much in the immediate glare. I think he will have the chance to develop away from the limelight to a certain extent. And I think the family feel that Jude, all the indications are that the family feel that Jude benefited massively from that. So I can see the sense in the next step of his career being out of England, yeah. And I guess from a Sunderland point of view as well, just from a Sunderland fan point of view, probably won't feel as painful watching Jobe Bellingham strut his stuff for Borussia Dortmund against Bayern Munich as it would watching him bang a goal in for Palace against Sunderland, would it? Or a Brentford or a whatever, you know what I mean? I think if he ends up at Eintracht Frankfurt or Borussia Dortmund and he's playing Champions League football next season, I think as a Sunderland fan, you probably say, well, okay, fair enough. You did absolutely everything for us while you were here. Clearly, that is a career progression. It's not as much of a career progression, you could argue, if he ends up at a Palace or a West Ham or an Everton or whatever.
And had Sunderland lost on Saturday, we'd have been sat in this conversation now. We'd have also been talking about Dan Neil and Ballard and Rigg and Hume and Count Mayenda. Do you think that's dead now? Do you think Sunderland will keep hold of all of those players? If Bellingham goes, do you think he'll be the only high-profile departure this summer?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Now, this can come back to bite you. And obviously, until money is actually put on the table, you just never know, do you? And Sunderland obviously have to be mindful of where various players are at in terms of their contract. Dan Neil's contract in particular is going to have to be resolved one way or the other. Well. What Sunderland are not going to want to do is get into a scenario with either of those players where they're well into their last year and you really do run the risk then of them becoming assets that depreciate massively quickly. But all things being equal, I think Sunderland will look at it and say, well, we don't have to sell any of these players at the minute. I would be hopeful that they would be able to hang on to them this summer. Yeah, like I say, with the only slight sticking point being Neil and Cirkin in particular, probably Neil in particular, you're probably going to want to know, you're going to want a firm contract decision from him one way or the other by the end of the summer. And that then maybe dictates what you do if offers are in for him. But all things being equal, you would hope Sunderland could hold on to the rest of them now, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and the interesting thing is going to be clearly in terms of ins, how Sunderland approach this now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because we've seen the strategy that has clearly worked wonders over the course of the last year or two. The signing of Enzo Lafay in January was a major shift, wasn't it? That deal is now going to become permanent. How else do they approach it? Are they going to sign 2 £30 million players, or are they going to sign 4, 8, 9 million pound players? Are they going to continue trying to buy rough diamonds and shine them up over the course of the next 12 months? That's going to be fascinating now to see how it plays.
Are they going to sign Jordan Henderson?
Well, yeah,
we'll get to that in a minute. But so I think the broad thrust of their transfer policy will not change, and the broad thrust of Sunderland's transfer policy is we want to be signing players that have development potential, that we can improve, and that we can either improve and they will improve our team, or we can improve and we can sell on and make a profit. Now, that doesn't mean that the only way you can do that is by signing, in inverted commas, unheard of Frenchmen, is it? You know what I mean? Sunderland now can maybe shop in a market where they can sign a player for 10 million, 15 million, with the very firm hope and belief that in 12 months' time, there'll be 30 or 40 million pound players. So all of a sudden, if you're shopping in a market and you're signing 3 or 4 players at that kind of level, that's a major investment, but it's still an investment that you hope will have a guarantee. What I don't envisage Sunderland doing is throwing a load of money at 30-year-old proven Premier League players who are looking for one last payday and will come and on £100,000 a week at Sunderland and then leave for next to nothing in 3 or 4 years' time. We know the club have been down that route in the past. Plenty of other Premier League clubs have as well. That will not happen under Speakman and Louis Dreyfus. Now, that said, would they sign someone like a Jordan Henderson? Well, potentially, because A, it would be a short-term deal. B, Henderson would be on big money, but it would be on big money for one season when they're in the Premier League. And it would be to do a specific job, which will be add a degree of experience, nous, leadership. We've talked about how, there are leaders there, but there's no one really who's experienced the Premier League in the way that, say, a Jordan Henderson has, and will be able to pass all of that on. Now, that deal's not done by any stretch of the imagination, don't get me wrong, but the noises that we're hearing suggest that Sunderland are at the very least considering that as a possibility. And I think, 1 or 2 deals like that would make a lot of sense, as long as they're not players on 3 or 4 year contracts that if Sunderland were to go back down in 12 months' time, you're saddled with these players. They don't really want to be in the Championship. The dressing room's a mess. Your wage bill's a mess and all of that. A one-off deal for Henderson, Sunderland would not allow to do that. So I think that is potentially an interesting one, but it will be an outlier in terms of what their main transfer business looks like. I'm pretty certain of that.
And clearly, in terms of transfers and what Sunderland need, we won't get into the details of that too deep because we've got a whole summer. We've got
got loads of these videos we need to keep.
And what on earth are we going to talk about in the middle of June? just to rattle through quickly. You clearly need cover at right back for Craig Hume. You need to determine what's happening with Chris Meffam. Well, if you're not signing him, you need a centre back.
Yeah, I mean, so just on that, I can envisage it. I think Sunderland would like to sign Meffam. The interesting thing out there will be, will there be other Premier League competition for him who potentially might pay more than Sunderland? I suspect Sunderland might also look to make the Samed deal permanent.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think Labris likes him.
I mean,
Labris. Sorry,
I'll say one thing for Samed: he can dance. He was dancing through.
The thing with him is, he's not an unknown, is he? He has a pedigree, and he came with a pedigree. Now, Sunderland haven't seen any of that pedigree, but I think if Labris feels that he can trust him, I think Sunderland might go and try a real low ball offer to say, look, we've got a player here who, it hasn't worked for him in the last 12 months. You were wanting him out anyway when we signed him on loan. Is there a deal to be done here? Might be another loan deal, but it wouldn't surprise me if they opted to do something there.
Because then when you move to midfield, well, clearly you might have to replace Jobe Bellingham.
Yeah.
Plus, I think you need one more body in there at least. We've talked
anyway, and it becomes 2 probably if Samed doesn't come back.
Yeah.
Plus Bellingham.
On the flanks, you probably need one cover in each. I think we're safe to assume that Abdullah Bar is not going to come back and rip it up in the Premier League. So,
or Jan Paveda playing a major role next season.
So you probably need a winger on each, and then they tried to sign a striker in January. They did sign a striker in January in Jayden Dance. So does that tell you they need a centre forward? So just in a whistle-stop tour, really, that shows you.
Well, we're up to 8, 9, or 10, aren't we?
Yeah, just how much work there is to be done. And I suspect Christian Speakman might well have enjoyed his night Saturday night, but it'll have been hard back to work on Monday morning because there's a lot to be done away from all that as well, isn't there? Just getting prepared for Premier League football again. We know from talking to the media team, for example, just how much work has to go on behind the scenes to prepare for all that comes with Premier League football. It's going to be a mad busy few months for everyone.
No, it is. It absolutely is. And I think, the first couple of deals are going to be really interesting because then we'll get a proper handle on, what kind of player, what level are we talking, where we're looking at, won't we? You know what I mean? But I think you're right. I think you look at right the way across the squad and you can make arguments that in the vast majority of positions, there's a need to strengthen or at least add some depth, which isn't really there at the moment. So yeah, watch this space because it's going to be busy. It's definitely going to be busy.
And down in that mix zone on Saturday night, we spoke to Luke O'Neill and Patrick Roberts, Eliza Mayenda, very briefly. You did well to spin, 500-600 words out of that. Who else did we speak to? Anthony Patterson.
Yeah.
And after getting the kind of colour and emotion and flavour from them all, attention kind of turned to, can you stay up? Because for 2 successive seasons now, the teams that have gone up have come back down. It's very early, clearly, and we don't want to kind of pop the bubble, pop the balloon. But can Sunderland? How does Sunderland prepare? How does Sunderland go about preparing for the Premier League?
Yeah, and I think
Patrick Roberts told us words to the effect of, we'll go all in, we'll give it a right go, we'll be bold, and you fully expect that to be the case. But the gap is getting bigger, isn't it? It's going to be a real challenge now to see how Sunderland cope.
Yeah, so there's 2 things I'd say on that. One is I do think Sunderland, there's an unknown quantity about Sunderland, which there isn't about a lot of the teams that come out of the Championship, in that we genuinely don't know where the ceiling is at for a lot of these players, and we don't know how quickly they can kick on and improve and settle to life in the Premier League. You know what? I mean, there's a lot of players in this Sunderland team that Premier League clubs have wanted to sign or would have wanted to sign if Sunderland hadn't gone up. So, you know, there is real quality in this team, and that at least gives you the possibility that Sunderland could kick on in a way that a lot of clubs that have gone up recently haven't. That said, the flip side of that is the reality is it's going to be really difficult. You know, Sunderland are going to, I mean, they're already heavily odds on to go back down. They're almost certainly going to go on some lengthy losing runs. They're almost certainly going to finish on the wrong side of some pretty hefty defeats. How does everyone deal with that? I wrote a column over on our sister site over at the Northern Echo on around this, basically just saying that once the euphoria dies down, there does have to be an acceptance that this is going to be rough. This is going to be difficult. It's going to be challenging. And I just hope that all the people who have done so much to get Sunderland to where we are now don't suddenly become public enemy number ones because it's not going well. And that's right across the club. That's us as media. We have a role in that. That's fans. That's the board. That's everyone. You know, I said in it, it would be absolutely awful if Regis Labrissa's reward for everything that he's done in turning Sunderland round in these last 12 months is to get sacked in November if Sunderland are sat 19th with 2 wins to their name. And that's possible. Let's be absolutely realistic about it. That is possible. You know, Sunderland could be in the autumn, starting to look like they're getting a bit stranded in the bottom 3, struggling to win games. It's possible. Clearly, we all hope it's not. And it's not nailed on. It's not definite, but it's possible. If all of that happens, I just hope that the club stand firm and realise that they've come so far so quickly that they, you know, it's the right thing to do, because if it all goes wrong and some do end up back in the Championship, they're going to struggle to find a better head coach than Labris to get them back out of it. They're going to struggle to find a better group of players than the ones they've already got. But it's also the right thing to do, because, you know, what's the point of trying to achieve something if your reward for it is to be knocked right back down the minute things start going wrong?
And it's a reminder, isn't it, just how quickly things can change in football, because 12 months ago, we spent countless hours on here trying to pick the bones out of the slump in the second half of the season, 16th place finish, the search for a head coach, in which we asked on several occasions, does someone know what they're doing? Because that many names came out and that many names were dismissed. And yet here we are, 12 months down the line, promotion, talk of how Sunderland are going to attack the transfer window. Are they going to sign a £30 million footballer? You know, what they're capable of. It's just a reminder.
No, it is. Really, it absolutely is. And I think, you know, for all that we've knocked him and for all that some fans still have reservations, I think Speakman will get that. And I think Louis Dreyfus will get that as well. I think they know that ahead of schedule is a bit unfair because, you know, Sunderland have put building blocks in place. Clearly, this has been where they wanted to get to. But I think there's got to be an understanding that, you know, they are playing. Well, let's not, you know, they're playing catch up against your Brightons, your Brentfords, your Bournemouth. Never mind your Man Cities and your Liverpools and your Arsenals. You know, and I know that's difficult because Sunderland are Sunderland. They're a massive club. They'll sell out the stadium alike. They've got the history, and I get all of that. The reality is, at the minute, Brighton can sign a completely different type of player than Sunderland almost certainly can. That's just the reality of where we're at now with the Premier League. Brentford can, Bournemouth can, Everton can, West Ham can, and yet Sunderland are going to have to try and overhaul some of these teams to stay up next season. Can they do it? Yes, they can, but it's going to be really difficult.
Just to wrap up, I'd seen Sunderland ask the question on their platforms this week, your moment of the weekend. And I know, obviously, the Watson, the goal, but there were countless others.
There were loads. There were absolutely loads. I thought Lebris celebrating with the trophy was great because that's a part of him you don't really see at all. I thought that was really nice. I thought amid all the celebrations, the massive cheers for the likes of Peter Reid, Kevin Phillips, Niall Quinn when they were coming up on the big screen, I thought that was really nice because it shows that this is part of a kind of thread, if you like. You know what I mean? This is Sunderland history being created and you know, linking in with all of that. I mean, Trafalgar Square was typically bonkers, wasn't it? It was quite brilliant to see. So many. I mean, how do you get past the moment, though? How do you get past the goal in the moment? I mean, as a one-off footballing moment, the ball going in, the roar of the crowd, Watson peeling off with his top off, going bonkers, the realization that had to be it. Time was up. That was it. Sheffield United weren't getting back into this. I don't think you can beat that, can you?
There was a fella sat right in the press box. I don't know whether I pointed out at the time, because obviously it was a bit manic, but he like stood on like the railing in front, just with his arms up like that. And he didn't move for 20 odd minutes, just when everyone was like around him.
Yeah.
He was still there.
Yeah. The post-match wise men say as well. I mean, that was genuinely spine-tingling. It was last time round against Wickham as well, to be fair. But this time, you know, just because of the enormity of the event, even more so. And like, you know, we're all a bit biased, aren't we? But is there a better anthem for a moment like that in football? I know all clubs probably think they've got one, but I don't think there is. There was something really special about that.
And you mentioned there about the likes of Peter Reid and Niall Quinn, Kevin Phillips, who were all there. But also figures from the very recent history. Jack Clark was there.
Yeah.
Tony Mowbray. Mike Dodds was there. All the former managers were appointed. Michael Beale were invited. Michael Beale was invited, but was away, so couldn't make it. I just thought that was a classy touch.
It's a good touch. Yeah, it's a really, really good touch because, you know, clearly there will have been emotions when those people left. I'm sure there were falling outs along the way, but, you know, ultimately they've all played a really big role in getting Sunderland to this moment. Yeah, I thought that was a lovely touch.
Well, do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because there's going to be plenty of Premier League talk now in the weeks and months ahead. And the offer there is running across the bottom. If you don't subscribe to We Are Sunderland, it's just £1 for 6 months there, which gets you full inside tactical analysis and obviously loads of transfer talk over the course of the summer. Yeah, press subscribe on the YouTube channel if you haven't already. And if you prefer to listen on your podcast platforms, we're obviously available where all platforms are, all the various platforms, so you can rate and review on there as well. But thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Hope you had an amazing weekend, as I'm sure you did. And we'll be back next week to look ahead to the summer. And We Are Sunderland. Thanks very much. Take care.